My name is Carlos Rivera. How's the conference going so far? Pretty well?
Excellent.
Some really good talks. I'm sure this one will also be a fantastic one. This is Chase Upchurch. He's no longer a senior. He just graduated as a music education major at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania. He teaches private voice and piano lessons at Sing Sing Sing, a contemporary private music company. And he serves as the choir director and pianist at Nixon United Methodist Church in Butler, Pennsylvania. Lastly, when Chase is not studying or teaching, he enjoys composing, directing, and gigging. So he's going to talk to you a little bit about a perspective from a student and new and contemporary music practices. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chase Upchurch.
Thank you. So when I first actually submitted the abstract, I was a student. I've just recently graduated. I worked as a long-term substitute at a high school as well, and so I have a little bit of experience teaching, just a little bit outside of school as well. And this is just kind of what I think about some of this general music and stuff that we're doing. And now I won't put this on full view because of the piano. You won't be able to see it. So if you didn't get a handout, there is one over there if you need to get one of those. I really like this layout because it shows one path of the circuit really working and one path not working. And I think that's really representative of some of our general music classes in music education today, is that a lot of our general music classes kind of dud, and students don't leave with a lot of joy or like lifelong learners like we would imagine them to be. So just a couple disclaimers. I don't have any fancy letters after my name. I'm not a PhD student. I don't have my master's, etc. As a lot of these great presenters today that I've seen. What you see in this packet and what I present on today is not researched. I have nothing to back this up, and it's hopefully going to be collaborative in nature. And so these are just some ideas, some thoughts, some perspectives to try to start some dialogue from a perspective of a student. So what really is this? It's a song analysis and performance class. And so how it really works is we take music, we listen to it, we discuss it, we create it, and then we reflect upon what we believe we gained from that music. And so hopefully we're getting students to be exposed to new music, different genres of music, new ways of thinking about music, instead of just letting music pass in one ear and pass out the other. Hopefully getting them to really start to think about music on a more intellectual and emotionally intellectual level as well. And it's really getting students to talk in their language with us as teachers. And so we really need to start talking their language so that they can be reciprocal to that as well, using popular music. So how does this work? There are 6 parts to this that I tried to construct and make some sort of relative quote-unquote curriculum. And so it starts with listening. So picking songs, focus and start it in popular music that hopefully they like or they love or that they're just used to, something that's going to start with them. And then after that, hopefully they would have maybe some lyric sheets as well printed out and put in front of them. And as we're listening, we're just trying to gain preliminary awareness. And so like students might be taking their pencils and highlighting words that mean something to them. They might be writing adjectives, things that they connect to on an emotional level. And then after that, we discuss these lyrics and we try to blend together our experiences of the music and our experiences as people. And so these students are not only hearing what I think about music or what I believe music to be, but they're hearing what their peers are saying about music. Or maybe they both highlighted the same lyric, but they have 2 different ways of interpreting it. And so we can start to blend these ideas and start to build a little bit of empathy in students as they try to hold 2 ideas at once. After that, we try to understand the musical theory behind the work. And this is where a lot of the Little Kids Rock training comes in. Little Kids Rock has done a lot of work on breaking down songs on their teaching site and putting like the bass and the guitar and the piano, etc. All of those things on there. So that would be a great resource to do that. But that would be primarily teacher-led, using our musical knowledge and background to help them understand some of the things that they're hearing and start to label that. Like this is the bass and this is the form of the song, etc. And then after that, if you can, if it's possible, performing the song together. So this would be part of the recreation stage. So we're just taking those elements of the music and seeing if we can get them, even just on a basic level, to create some of this music or recreate it. Or on the flip side, if we're studying a genre, maybe we then create our own song within that genre or something that's similar to that genre. So not only have we listened to it, we've gained a little bit of awareness, we've discussed what it means to us musically and lyrically, we've learned some of the theory, but now we're trying to actually be a little bit active about our music making. So both receptive and active music making. And then after that, hopefully a little bit of reflection with the students. And so if you have the handout, I put on the second page, if you want to turn to the second page, some questions that I thought of for each of these sections, and just a little bit of breakdown, so that if this was something that you would be interested in, you could just take this and put it in your classes immediately. You don't have to really put a lot of thought into creating it. Hopefully a lot of that work was done kind of on here, and then you can expand from this foundational template. And so, like, part of the discussion, I just put some questions down, like, can I have some volunteers talk about what the lyrics spoke to them, or what lyrics didn't you like? What repelled you in this music? Why would you maybe not listen to this music again, or why would you listen to it again? What did you like or what didn't you like? And if you didn't like something, can I challenge you to find something in the music that you like, both lyrically and musically? Getting students to really push outside of their boundaries. When I did this in the classes in my long-term substitute position, I found that most students just said, I hate it. And that was like, if they had never heard it before, they're, I hate it. And so I had to end up like amending that and say, okay, so if you don't like it, tell me one thing that you did like about it. You need to find something in there. Some of those kind of critical skills that I think can sometimes be lost in our music classes. And then discussions about the music. What elements of music did you hear in this song? And so on the first day of my substitute position, we went down to the music lab, and the question on the board was, what is music? That was it, just what is music? And I just had them raise their hand, and we came up with a bunch of ideas. No matter how crazy they were, no matter how out there they were, or totally maybe wrong, it was, what do you think music is? We wrote every single one on the board, and we discussed every single one of them. And then the next question was, what has to be a part of music? And this was the fun one for me, as a composer and as a musician, because they would put things in there, and I would write all of them down on the board, and then we went through every single one and disproved them. Whether it was using experimental music or John Cage or etc., right? It was like, this doesn't have to be part of music, right? And so just trying to expand, like, what do they actually think music is? Where are they at in their musical awareness? And then after that, we went, what is usually a part of music? And that is what we used as what we called our elements of music for the entire class. And so we had what is usually part of music, and as we would listen to these songs, I would have them write down the elements of music that they heard in the piece. And so if a piece had bass, if a piece had lyrics or instruments, tempo, dynamics, etc., they were getting a little bit of this vocabulary in kind of an informal way. I wasn't really like, this is what tempo is, or this is what, we were just listening to it and labeling it. And so we used elements of music and opinion as our two foundations for this song analysis. And I also wrote some possible extra things. How does this title relate to the music? How does it relate to your life? Does it relate to your life? What does this mean to you? Etc. And I found that this is a great tool for learning about my students, because I really got to figure out what do they actually think about music and what do they think about themselves through this music, which was pretty cool. And then keeping going with the theory, we would analyze the theory for the elements of music, harmony, chord progressions, how does it relate to other pieces of music. So sometimes we would take two pieces of music. We might take something that Beethoven wrote and then a Drake song. And then we would say, are the same elements of music in it? And it was almost always yes, or like 90% of it was yes. And maybe Beethoven didn't use lyrics and Drake does, but most of it was there. And how do these composers really get this piece of music and this piece of music using the same elements? How do we take those ingredients and make something completely different? And why do we feel so strongly about this, but not about this? And so really getting the students to discuss and think about, like, how can we come up with an opinion or an emotional response on music, and why do we have these emotional responses? So what is the point? The biggest one for me is access into music education. Obviously, that is the point of our entire conference, is how do we get non-traditional students and students that are in our music programs who just might not be as interested as they possibly could be to be more interested and become lifelong learners. Guiding students towards thoughtful reflections about themselves and others. This is a huge issue, I think, even in our current society, is the thoughtfulness of how we interact with each other. And using music as a conduit. Music is such a powerful tool that all of us in this room understand can help us to build those empathy skills, but as a 7th grader, they might not understand. And so guiding them and facilitating that process for them to really think emotionally and intellectually about music is hopefully the goal of this. The joy of music as well, but they kind of bring that by bringing their own music. Exposing students to critical thinking on an emotional level, we talked about that, and really empathy. So you're just a kid. How can you justify this? You told us you're not a PhD student and you have no credentials and you've worked as a long-term sub for 2 months. So you're looking at me like, who is this guy and why is he here? So if you turn to the back of the handout, I went through the NASM handbook, which is a little ridiculous. It's very long, like very long. And I scanned it for when it talked about general music and some of the practices and ways that it talks about general music. And I copied and pasted those in there, but I would really like to turn to the back of that page, and it's the last thing that I copied and pasted in there. It's section 4, guidelines for specific aspects of music in general education. And they write, music education for the general college student. NASM recognizes that students enter colleges and universities with a wide variety of experiences and backgrounds in music. Institutions should operate programs that take into account this variety by focusing on the development and aesthetic evaluation of musical perception. Programs should include a variety of musical styles and cultures and provisions of appropriate lengths of study. And so as I was trying to create this new kind of way of thinking about music from a discussion and an analytical point of view, where we're talking about this was kind of where I started. I started at the collegiate level where I was, and I went into a general music class, and to me, it was kind of interesting. They were playing Debussy, who was my favorite composer, and so I was in the back just watching, and I kind of peered over, and everyone was on their phone or laptop. No one cared, absolutely no one, except me. And it was Clair de Lune, one of my favorite pieces, and that's almost like kind of ridiculous because it's Clair de Lune, but it's beautiful. But they played the entire Clair de Lune, and so I was like, okay, like maybe a snippet, maybe like the first minute or something for these students, because they definitely don't care, first of all. But like they play the entire thing, like there are people sleeping, and so I was like, what are we doing? And so I asked some of my professors, and I'm like, do we have to teach that? And they're like, well, no, we don't. Like NASM doesn't really say that we have to teach anything. And that's also in here as well. I highlighted that section. NASM just says, like, here are some suggestions, here are some guidelines. And so you can really do kind of whatever you need to do within these boxes. And so I thought, well, why don't you use Debussy? Sure, but why don't you start with Drake? Like, why don't you then compare those elements? Why don't you have them do some analysis and then move into Debussy? Why don't we start where they are and then push them into new places? And so that's kind of where the NASM came from. And now as I'm teaching in a high school / junior high, it's become very, very helpful there as well. And so I also put in some of the national standards as well. I didn't do state standards because we're in New York right now and everyone's coming from different places, but I did put some of the national standards as well as some ideas. So for the first one, creating. After listening to the music, analyze the piece for its basic elements of music, create your own simple units of music, beat and melody as a class. Just preliminary type things, and it checks off all of these boxes that administrators are looking for, and I, as a young teacher who is not tenured, have to definitely check off. And so hopefully that's kind of helpful as well, to just have the standards there and say, yeah, like what we're doing in this curriculum, what we're doing with popular music is part of the national standards, and we can check off everything that you're doing in your classical teaching style with popular music as well. So you don't have to look them up. So if you turn to the back, there are some lyrics, and I would like to let's just try a little bit of it. We're going to start with Stressed Out by 21 Pilots, if the sound works. And it doesn't, so that's cool.
Do you have the
Aux cord.
little thing over there. Let's try that.
That should work.
There we go. All right, let's try again. It's gonna make me go through all these things, crazy. There we go.
There we go.
Got it. So this is one that I actually used in my class with the students, and it worked really well, which was awesome. I was not expecting that.
I wish I found some better sounds no one's ever heard. I wish I had a better voice and sang some better words. I wish I found some chords in an order that is new. I wish I didn't have to rhyme every time I sang. I was told when I get older all my fears would shrink, but now I'm insecure and I care what people think. My name's blurry face and I care what you think. My name's blurry face and I care what you think. Wish we could turn back time to the good old days when the mama sang us to sleep, but now we're stressed out. Wish we could turn back time to the good old days when the mama sang us to sleep, but now we're stressed out.
So in the class, I would play the entire song. Got it, thank you. I would play the entire song and we would go through some of these discussion questions. And as they're listening, they would be writing down the elements of music that we've discussed and that they've heard. And so I'd ask them, what elements did you hear? And sometimes they wouldn't cover all of them. So I would have an opportunity to turn it back and say, well, here's actually, listen for this. That's the bass and there's the harmony. So we're kind of informally pushing some of those vocabularies. As well as, then I would ask them, what do you think of the song? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Why? Why didn't you like it? Or why did you like it? Which would create another discussion. And then I go into some of these discussion questions. One of the things that that I highlighted as we did this was some of the things that stuck out to me. So wish we could turn back time to the good old days. And so I would just ask you out here, like, what's a memory of a good old day? Does anyone care to share? Yeah.
Just being like a little kid with no cares. You go to school for your 6 hours, hang out with your friends, and then come back and play in the backyard or something. No responsibilities, just bliss and fun.
Yeah, totally. Which is different than our experience now. Thank you for sharing. Another one that stuck out to me was, now I'm insecure and I care what people think. Like, why would the artist write that? Does that resonate with anyone? Everyone, right? And to us, it's like, but to a junior high kid, they're like, I don't, is anyone else experiencing that? Is it just me? Right? And so I had some of these kids raise their hand, like, very cautiously. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I'm insecure about stuff. And I'm like, me too. I'm your teacher and I am. Every time I get in front of you, I'm insecure. I care what you think about me. Right? And so we're starting to build some of these skills where they're like, oh, it's okay to feel and talk about it in front of my friends. And music can help me do that. Right? And so hopefully that, you know, when they get into these places where they are anxious or they are feeling these things, or they are sad or they are happy, they can use music and actually go back to music as part of, you know, who they are and creating a part of their identity as well. And just, you know, kind of a funny thing, some of us chuckled. I wish I could find some better chords in an order that is new. I wish I didn't have to rhyme every time I sang. So funny things like that. Teaching form, like, you know, rhyme scheme, like that's an obvious, you know, part of the rhyme scheme that they chose to ignore to talk about form. And so we can do that with our students as well, as long as we know the music, you know, finding examples of that are really good teachers for our students. So my experience, we start just with what is music, elements and opinions. My students every single time would come in and they would say, like, are we doing elements and opinion today? And I'm like, yeah, we can do some of that today, which was pretty cool. I didn't use it as the main part of my teaching. This did not take up the entire class period every time. I used it as supplemental material. Maybe it would take the first 10 or 15 minutes. Then I would link it with some literacy as well. And then we would create beats together, some little kids rock stuff, and I do a little Dalcroze and stuff like that. And so I'm just trying to get them to have a diverse kind of experience, but also making sure that I'm giving representation to them and allowing them to talk about their opinion. like we love talking about our opinion. That's how social media exists, right? And so think about a high schooler or a junior high person who they want to tell the world what they think, and they haven't been presented with, you know, maybe many perspectives. And this gives a good opportunity for students to talk about who they are, give their identity, share their voice, and also hear things that are going to challenge what they think of the world, and doing all of that in the space of music.
Okay.
Last thing, I do continue to use this and develop the concept. So if any of you have any ideas about this, or you take it home and you do it yourself, or you share it with someone, I would love to hear what you think. My email is on the top of this page. And so, you know, if you have any ideas, please let me know so that we can, you know, try to get music in our schools to be a little more authentic and a little bit more reflective of our students. All right, thank you.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes for questions and answers, so.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So I don't know if I caught this or not, but what grade did you teach for the substitute position?
I taught 6th through 12th, and I had one class of general music that was 7th grade. And some of the teachers, we would joke around at lunch sometimes, like this was a very challenging 7th grade class. And so I came in like bright-eyed out of college. Well, I was actually still in college, but I was like, we're gonna make music every day, and it's gonna be all active music making, because that's, you know, what would be amazing. And they couldn't keep a beat, you know. And so, and I like don't like desks in the classroom because I do movement activities and stuff. So I got rid of all the desks. I pushed them all over. They couldn't handle it. And so like I like slowly put us into a small structure, and then I started using this, and it was successful, and we started getting it places. And like for as challenging as these 7th graders were, and there were a couple who like totally had like no diverse experiences outside of their own experience. And so I asked one of the students, I was like, what do you like to do? And he's like, well, I like to trap hunt. And I was like, okay, awesome. And we were talking about like these lyrics, and I said, well, like what's like, that was like another day. So that's all he would share. That's it. And he was like, period, done. And then we were talking like, what's a good old day? And he raised his hand. And he was like, well, one of the good old days for me was when my grandfather like gave me my first gun, and I went out with him, and then he passed away like after that. And I was like, whoa, this kid just like shared their music. Like he would have never done that before. And so, you know, even with these students who weren't necessarily ready yet to make active music in the short amount of time that we had, this was a great conduit for them.
What time of the year did you enter into that position? I'm just asking, like, in
Yeah.
terms of, like, what was the classroom dynamic? Did the students already know each other?
They did know each other, yep, and it goes by quarter, and I entered at, like, the last month and a half of the school year. So, and then we had to, like, prepare concerts, so it was great. It was, like, trial by fire, here we go, you know? And so I had all these ideas for general music, and I'm, like, developing them, and I was like, here we go, you know? I was like, if I'm gonna talk about it, let's do it. And so I planned on just coming and talking about these ideas, but I had an opportunity for about 5 weeks to actually use some of them and start to build and mold it. And it's still kind of developing. Anything else? Last one.
Unless someone else
No,
has
no, that's
one.
fine.
Oh, is
No,
it, do we have time? Okay, cool.
Did you find, like, something that was the most surprising in terms of your students' reactions to it? Like, was there something that just, like, really just surprised you with their reaction to it?
The most surprising thing was we all had notebooks, and I would have them write in their notebooks, and every night I would look and see what did they think. And over time, the music, like I brought in like Caval Spieri, and I brought in classical music and stuff like that, and they would all just say, I hate it. And after, at least if they hated it, they would start to put why, or they would say, I'm just not comfortable with it. And I was like, yes. Like that, because that's, you know, now we can go somewhere. And some of them were like, I actually would listen to this, it's very calming. And I was like, whoa. So it was very surprising just to see their progression in only 5 weeks, with some of them really turning face and saying, you know, I might try some of this different music. And it's not that different from what I'm listening to.
Good. Well, I was gonna say one last thing, because we gotta finish up. It's just that there's a lot to be said about that first day of all of us teaching. That really got me back to my first day of teaching, and the kind of what I thought was going to happen versus what happened. And I did totally the very similar thing where I shared a piece of music that I loved. It was Copeland. It was the finale for I forget what, and it was one of the pieces. Anyways, I played this piece of music I loved for the class at USC. It was like, you know, ear training class, second year. and I played it, and I almost wept because I was opening my first class that way with the
Yep.
best music I knew, and I finished, and I looked at them, and they were like this. They had that face like, what is happening here with my education? I feel like their look was totally different, and that I think that's a great conversation for all of us teachers to have. You know, thanks for sharing that, because it brought me back.
Yeah.
Pretty hard.
Yeah, it was.
All gone through
It was
This
great.
is
It
your
was
thing.
the first 3 days. Oof. It
Right?
was great though, but it was fun to learn
Babe,
that.
you're reframing it now. You did not go home saying that was awesome.
Are you sure? Because I was like, my colleague was like, is everything okay? I'm like, I'm excited. I was
Okay.
like, nothing worked.
Okay.
It's like, and now I've got next week, so you know, it was fun. But thank you all. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So great.